If you're going to follow along in your scriptures this morning, you need to turn to Joshua chapter 1 and maybe put a marker in chapter 3 and part of chapter 4 as well, as we read the story of Joshua getting ready to move the children of Israel across the Jordan River into the Promised Land. This is one of those times when Joshua's faith and the faith of the people of Israel were really important in the story. It opened the door for God to be able to work. Sometimes we don't always know what's going to happen. People tell us things and they're well-intentioned when they tell us, and they mean to do what they say they're going to do, but they can't fulfill it. Sometimes people are misunderstood in the way they communicate things. For example, the weatherman. When the weatherman says to us there's an 80% chance of rain, what he means is this: out of every 100 days that they've recorded weather history, when the conditions are like this, it rains on 80% of them. And so when it doesn't rain on those 20% times, people say, oh, the weatherman doesn't know what he's talking about. And we make statements like, well, he predicted this, or it's supposed to rain, or it's supposed to do this. And we don't have a lot of confidence in it because the weatherman doesn't really control the weather. He only tells us what's going to happen based on the statistical odds of the history since they've been keeping weather reports. But what when God says something to us? What if God says, I'm going to do this? This is what's going to happen. We've all had times when we didn't know what God was going to do. He didn't tell us. He's not obligated to let us know everything he's going to do and how he's going to do it, and why he's going to do it, when he's going to do it. But sometimes God speaks very directly and says, this is what's going to happen. This is what I'm going to do. That's a little different. That's not it's supposed to be, or he's predicting. He is telling us something as a fact. This is the case with Joshua and the children of Israel as they're getting ready to cross the Jordan River over into the promised land of Canaan. God says, I am going to do this. I am going to deliver the land to you guys. I'm going to give it to you as a gift to show the people of the world that I really am the Lord. I'm sovereign over all things, and you really are my chosen people, and I really do love you, and I really do have power. I'm going to speak through you to tell the whole world of who I am, and I'm going to give you this land as evidence of that. So what happens then to our faith when God says something specific like that? What happens when God directly says to us, I am going to do this? Well, it should bolster our faith, what I would call a determined faith. It's determined because it's already been determined what God is going to do, because he says exactly what he's going to do, but also determined in the sense that we are committed to it. We marry ourselves to it. We say to ourselves, God has specifically said this is going to happen, and I believe it. In this story we have of Joshua and the children of Israel, we see some of the impact of that a determined faith impacts our lives. A determined faith reveals something within us, and it shows itself in certain ways. I want to share some thoughts on that today. When God says, not 80% chance, this is going to happen, how do we respond to that in faith? What does it do to us? One of the things it does to us, it gives us a confident spirit. You read in chapter 1, verses 10 and 11, these words. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God has given you for your own. I'll go back to those words again. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here. This isn't if, I might, I hope so. God says this, but we're really not sure. He says this with a confident spirit because God has specifically told him what he's going to do, and Joshua has a determined faith, a committed faith, a genuine solemn belief that God is going to do what he says he's going to do. Years ago, when I was teaching at a college in Iowa, someone decided that I would be saving a lot of time if I put all my grades on a computer. This was 30 years ago, and this is all new to me. I didn't know anything about computers at all. They had this little thing called the floppy disk that tells you how old it was. And it had a little grade book program on it. You entered the student's name and the assignment and the point total for the assignment and how many points they got, and it made a running total of everything. And I got about 3/4 of the way through the semester, and up on the screen while I was putting in grades one day, up on the screen it came up and says, there's a program error and you can't go on. It's like it freezes the screen. And before I get out of it, it says, would you like to save your changes? Well, I'd already put in several grades that day, and I said, yeah, I want to save my changes, so I clicked on save. Well, what I didn't know was that it also saved the error. So now I've got all these students' grades and all their points for like 3/4 of the semester all locked into a computer that I don't have a clue how to open and how to get it out again. And no matter what I tried, it wouldn't work for me. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. There's a lady at this college, her name is Sue. She wasn't really in the computer department, but she knew a whole lot more about computers than I did. And she said, I think I can fix that for you. I can get those grades back out of there. I said, go for it. Handed her the disk. I go home and tell my wife the story of how my computers froze up. It saved the error. All my grades are locked in. I don't know what we're going to do if I can't get the grades out. I can't just make up grades. Students may wanted me to, but I can't just make up the grades. And she said, what are you going to do? I said, I gave the disk to Sue. And she says that she can fix it. And Debbie said, do you think she really can? Well, she says she can. I think she probably can. She probably is going to be able to. I sure hope so. Well, that's not really a very confident spirit. Joshua doesn't say to the children of Israel, God said that this is going to happen. I think he means it. I think it's probably going to. I hope he really can do it. No, that's not what he says at all. God specifically told him what he was going to do, and Joshua believed him. He had this determined faith that gave him a confident spirit. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here, and you will go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God has given you for your own. When God spells out something specific and says, this exact thing I'm going to do, use an old expression, you can take it to the bank. This is something you can be certain of, something you can be positive about. We can have a confident spirit. And that's the way that Joshua talked to the people of Israel. And that's the spirit that was in him because he knew God would keep his word. Something else that happens when you have a determined faith is that it drives us toward obedient action. It is designed for us to respond to in some kind of act of obedience because of our faith. From chapter 3, I've squeezed some verses together here. It says this, Joshua said to the Israelites, come here, listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you. As soon as the priest who carried the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is set at flood stage during the harvest. Yet as soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away. So the people crossed over the opposite Jericho. The priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of Jordan and stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Joshua had expressed this confident spirit, you will cross here 3 days from now. And now he's telling this to the people, and their response is to be obedient. And Joshua's obedient. The people carrying the Ark of the Covenant are being obedient to God's commands and God's principles. They'd never seen anything like this before. It's not like the river stopped flowing all the time every time they stepped into it. This was something new. This is something dynamic. This was miraculous. This was an act of God. They had believed that somehow God was going to do what he said he was going to do, and it prompted them to take action. I've often wondered about the people of Israel who were crossing after the people had the Ark of the Covenant in the water, and the waters are heaping up, how confident they were at a river in flood stage saying, well, what if the water just kind of collapses and the water starts rushing again, the river starts flowing again as we're halfway across? But they believed God, and maybe they were fearful, I don't know, but they went across because determined faith prompts us toward action. I'm teaching a psychology class several years ago, and we were talking about different neurotransmitters and hormones and so on, and we were talking about adrenaline and the impact adrenaline has on our body, and most of you are familiar with that. We talked about this term in class, adrenaline junkie, people who like to do dangerous things and they think it's fun. And their bumper sticker reads, if it can't kill you, it's not a real sport. This is the attitude of adrenaline junkie, things that are dangerous and super exciting, they want to be a part of. And I asked the class whether or not anybody here was an adrenaline junkie. And there was a young lady in the back row who raised her hand who, I don't know how to describe it, but her personality was such that you wouldn't ever dream she would be an adrenaline junkie at all, that she would do dangerous things or things that were based on speed or terror, I would call it, and so on. And she raised her hand and I said, oh really, you're a junkie? And she said, yeah. She said, in fact, over spring break, I went bungee jumping for the last few days of spring break. And I thought, you went bungee jumping? She said, Dr. Penn, have you ever going to go bungee jumping? I says, no. You want me to jump off the edge of a bridge or off the edge of a cliff or some kind with my feet tied onto a rubber band? No, this is not going to happen. And she said, well, man, if I really trust the equipment, I know the equipment's going to hold me, so I'm not scared at all when I jump. and I'm thinking, well, you have more faith in rubber bands than I do. This is not happening for me. But when you have real faith, when you have determined faith, when you really believe, in this case, if you really believe in the God who's telling you to do this thing, if you really believe that God says, I'm going to give you this land, I want you to cross this river, I'm going to give it to you, it's going to be all right, it prompts you to take action. Obedience and faith are really related together. We forget sometimes that faithfulness comes from the word faith. That is to say, we're faithful in our obedience to God because of our faith in Him and His faithfulness toward us. It's really, really hard to say, I have faith in God, but I'm not going to do what God tells me to do. A real faith, a determined faith, prompts us toward obedience. It prompts us to say, no matter what psychologists say, no matter what my friends say, no matter what my neighbors say, no matter what the news tells me to do, if God speaks to me and tells me to do something that lines up with the principles of His Word, the main source of His revelation to us, God says, this is the way you should go, this is what you should do, maybe this is what you shouldn't do. I'm going to be obedient to that because I have faith in God. I'm not predicting, I'm not guessing, it's not 80%. I believe that God's going to do what He says He's going to do, and I trust Him, I have faith in Him. Obedience and faith are interlocked together. They work together in our Christian walk. The last thing that happened in this particular story that I find interesting, you know the story, they cross over in the Jordan, it does heap up, they all cross safely across, and Joshua gives this order in chapter 4. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded. I've squeezed some verses here together today. He said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask your parents, what do their stones mean? Tell them, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what He had done to the Red Sea when He dried it up before us when we crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. It'd been neat to have been there and seen that. It'd be neat to see the pile of stones. You know, Dad, what are these piles of stones here for? And he tells the story about God's faithfulness. A dedicated faith, a determined faith, a real solid faith in God. When we obey it and we see God work, it drives us to want to tell other people what God has done and to give Him credit. What I find interesting in this monument, so to speak, that gets put together is the idea that when the kids ask their parents or grandparents someday, what do these stones mean? They don't say, oh, well, this is where, your uncle carried the Ark of the Covenant and he stood there the whole time when the children of Israel crossed over and we were really brave and we had a lot of faith and we did all these great things over here. And no, what's going to happen is the story's going to be told not about their faith, it's going to be stories about God's faithfulness. It's going to be stories about what God did and how He provided this miracle for them. The stone memorial wasn't intended to address the Israelites' faith, but it was intended to proclaim God's provision for them. It was intended to remind the people and the people after them and the people after them that God loves us and cares about us. He is faithful to what He says He's going to do. He has the power and control over the natural laws of the universe to perform His will in those things, and we can have faith, we can trust in Him. Determined faith results in God getting glory. A determined faith that prompts us toward obedience, that gives us this confident spirit, also prompts us to tell other people the good news about who God is and what He's done, and God gets all the credit and all the glory. May you have a determined faith. May you have a faith when God says, I'm going to do this, you believe Him, and you act in faithful obedience to that, and then He gets the glory from the way that we act and the way that we live. May God bless you all. Amen.